Hello, amazing humans on the net. Today, let me take you out for a walk. And featuring in this video will be Roxy, my 2-year-old fox red lab, aka the best dog in the world. So I know we're halfway through January, but we have got to talk about December books. And I thought it would be fun to do something different. I'm taking myself out of comfort zone and not doing the usual sit down video. I am taking you into my neck of the woods. Yes, pun intended. I leave these wrap-up videos deliberately till we about midway through the next month because I want to make sure I have had a chance to reflect on the books I've read properly. And I'm sure it happens to you too, when sometimes you change your mind about a book or you have new thoughts and new reflections that don't come to you until quite some time after you've finished the book. We at stop number 1 and we gonna go through books in the chronological order I read them. So in the beginning of December, I finished My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. I won't talk about it too much because I have talked about it in my video Best Books of 2024. This is one of those books where not much happens, but you do get to really know the characters and you almost get into their head and you know what they're thinking. Hello.
What are you doing?
I'm filming a video about books. Enjoy your walk. I almost didn't read this book because I had already started it once several months ago, couldn't get into it, but then saw a copy in the library, picked it up again, and I absolutely loved it. And yes, it even found its place in my 10 best books I read in 2024, so I highly recommend it. The style of writing here is also quite unique. If you like the kind of writing where you flow through the prose without much distinction for dialogues being separated with the traditional style of punctuation, then you will love this book. By the way, welcome to England. Look at these paddles. Okay, this is a much more comfortable spot. I am sitting on a bench instead of a tree trunk. So, after I've read My Name is Lucy Barton, I had my first introduction to Jane Austen because the second book I read was Pride and Prejudice. I partly listened to this book as an audiobook through Levy, the app that I use, that I can connect to via my regular library card, which is fantastic, by the way. It doesn't have as great and extensive choices as Audible, but you know, it's free. And partly I read a paper copy, and that actually worked really well for me, which binds well for War and Peace, which I have in store for next month. I'll tell you, I couldn't get enough of this book, okay? I read it before Christmas and it was a perfect pre Christmas read. And in fact, I will probably make it my tradition to read every year around Christmas time Jane Austen's book because it put me in such a good mood. Then I went and ruined it by reading 1984 by George Orwell. I'll talk about it in a minute, but Pride and Prejudice. I did not expect it to be so entertaining. I couldn't wait to go back to it. I found it witty, I found it joyful, and so funny. I mean, my favorite character was Mrs. Bennet. She was cracking me up. You really become friends with the characters in this book and you really cheer for them and root for them and you want them to be happy. I am obviously not going to talk about the plot of this book. It's such a well known book. At least I don't have to worry about spoilers. But let me read a couple of reflections I've read in my reading journal. So, this is what I've written. So much more than a romance or mesalliance made me reflect on how human nature has this tendency to so easily judge others when having only fracture of information about them. I think this is true, especially in today's world where information is so easily accessible, but often you only get snippets of information about another human being, and yet we are so quick to judge them. Ooh, Roxy, don't move my camera. I also wrote a note on Elizabeth specifically judging Charlotte and her choices. For those of you who haven't read the book or haven't recently watched the movie and don't remember, Charlotte was Elizabeth's friend and she decides to marry this, in the eyes of Elizabeth, boring but well off gentleman just to have some security in life. And it just made me reflect about how much of that we still experience in the current world, especially women are judged on their life choices. For example, whether to marry or not to marry, whether to have children or not to have children. So, yes, pretty extraordinary that a book which was written hundreds of years ago still is containing so much truth that applies to modern world as well. Let me end with an interesting fact because I did with this book what I always do with classics. I read them completely blind. I don't do any research because a classic book for me should stand on its own and I should just enjoy reading this story. But I do like to do a bit of research as well. And so I didn't realize, but Jane Austen wrote this book at the age of 20, but it wasn't published for another 17 years. So it wasn't published until she was 37. She died at the age of 41, so quite young. And this is why we only have a handful of novels by Jane Austen. But going back to my Christmas tradition of reading Austen, I think I'm sorted for the next 6 or 7 years because I've written down her titles. So Sense and Sensibility, Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger Abbey, Persuasion, and there's also a short novella titled Love and Friendship. Let me know if you've read the others and which one I should read during Christmas 2025. Okay, I'm well positioned on this gorgeous tree trunk. So, after the joyful read of Pride and Prejudice, what do? I reach for 1984 by George Orwell. This book, oh, this book. First of all, don't do what I did, which means don't read this around Christmas or before Christmas. It will put you in an extremely unsettled state of mind. You have been warned. This is probably one of the most depressing books I have ever read. And I say this as someone who doesn't normally steer away from dark books. I think that's because it does hit a nerve. It hits some kind of a truth within us. And that's why the emotional ride with this book is so extreme. Again, I don't think I need to tell you about the plot because this is a well known classic. And in fact, I think in some countries it's also part of school curriculum, which I think is crazy. In my opinion, you do need a little bit of life experience behind your belt in order to fully digest this book. In fact, my son expressed an interest in reading it, but since I have finished it, I said to him, no way. He's 13, by the way. No way you're reading this book. Pick it up again when you're 18. So let me read my notes on this book. The book made me reflect on the importance of the past and being able to remember the past. There is a very famous quote from this book which says, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. Clearly, it's true. If you control the past, you do control the present. If you control the information about the past, you get the power. And the other thought I had on this was that it's interesting because I think the events of this book, more or less, we could reflect on in relation to pretty much at least one world event per decade, if you think about it. Anyway, I don't want to go into too much of a philosophical discussion, but it was all very thought provoking for sure. The other thing I wrote was importance of loyalty, towards another individual. And this was also a theme in The Handmaid's Tale, which I've just finished. But I won't talk about it here. I'll talk about it in the January wrap up video, where that loyalty towards another individual was very much squashed and not allowed, and how destructive non existence of that loyalty is to a human being. Okay, we're going to wrap up with two little gripes I have about this book. One is the character of Julia. Julia is the only key female character in this book, and I have a problem with how George Orwell has written her, in that it was not very convincing to me. I mean, who engages with a man in a way Julia did? If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that note. In real world, and even if it's an alternative world of dystopia as it is in this novel, I bet you the words that she wrote on that note would not be the words she wrote, would be something entirely different. Not a woman I know would start a relationship with a man by saying what Julia said to Winston. That just felt a bit off for me. The second thing was the world building was slightly too long for me. It dragged out. I'm glad I've read it, but I'm glad I've finished. Okay, let's keep walking.
I know sooner or later it will come, the day that I'll know I'm in love. Will it feel warm and dry like a kiss in July? Will it chill down my bones? Will it cool like the snow? And I look at my window to see what the universe has in store for me. People passing by.
Book number 4, Playing Games by Huma Qureshi. This is a fantastic novel. I'll tell you what this book would be perfect. A holiday. You know, when you on holiday and you want something a little bit lighter, easier to read, but at the same time, you do want it to have some depth. You don't want it to be completely shallow. Well, this is it. This is the perfect book. The writing here is wonderful. It's very smooth. It's very flowing. My dog is going crazy, by the way. She found some kind of a stick. Oh no, she found some ice. She was just licking ice. Where was I? Yes, the writing is so smooth and so flowing. You get to really just focus on the characters and the story. And we follow here two sisters living in London. They're very different. One has her life very much together, and the other one is still trying to find herself. They are both shaped by the death of their mother, which happened during their formative years. I think they were both maybe in their late sort of teens, and they still seem to be recovering from that. There is a great portrayal of a sisterly relationship. I don't have a sister, so I can't be 100% sure, but to me, this felt extremely realistic. It's not too rosy, but there are some decent loyalties there too, if that makes sense. I have two brothers, so again, I can't comment on that. But if you have a sister, let me know if you've read this book, or I would recommend you read this book because I think you could really relate. I like the fact that the characters weren't black and white, and apart from the commentary on sibling relationship, you also have commentary on grief. You also have commentary on creative writing because the sister who is struggling in life, she is actually a playwright. So if that's the theme that you're interested in, you will like this book too. There are reflections on marriage as well and betrayal. But yes, at heart, it is a sisterhood story, and that sisterhood story is told in a lovely, nuanced, and honest way. I think this author is known for her short story collection titled Things We Do Not Tell the People We Love. I will definitely read it too because, like I said, I really enjoyed the writing in this one. But this is her first novel, so I hope she's going to write some more. And I've got to say, this was a perfect book after reading 1984. This completely took me out of that dark black hole of dystopia and put me again in a bit more positive and a bit more light state of mind. By the way, doesn't looking at trees also make you feel like your problems are actually not that big? This is what looking at trees make me feel like. It's so good for the soul. You look at all these wonderful trees that are hundreds of years old, and they will have seen many people like me. They will see many people like me after I die. And when you put things into that sort of perspective, I don't know, it just makes me worry less about little things. I never used to be a big walker, but I have become a serious walker since we got a dog 2 years ago, and I really enjoy my dog walks. I often listen to books, but sometimes I don't listen to anything. I just walk and look at trees. We at stop number 5 and book number 5. I'm very sorry, I need to be wearing my sunglasses because the sun is shining right into my face. I also had to put on my gloves because I'm getting colder and colder, and I have noticed my nose is getting redder and redder. So, yes, by the end of this walk, I will look like Rudolph the reindeer. I don't have a copy of book number 5 because I listened to it on Audible. It's titled Black Vodka, and it is a collection of short stories by Deborah Levy. I only stumbled on it because it was a free book on Audible. As you know, when you have a membership, you only get one book per month, and I often find myself in a hunt for some free audiobooks, and that was one of them. I talked about Deborah Levy in my non-fiction books to read for 2025, and I do plan to read her living autobiography. But this was a collection of short stories. And yes, it was an enjoyable read. They all center around, I would say, love. Really. And in fact, actually, that would be a great read for around Valentine's if you're into that sort of thing. If you're basically a reader that likes to read seasonal books. So, yes, I listened to it on Audible. Although I think with short stories, and this is the reflection I had after I listened to Black Vodka stories, you better off reading them on paper because they are short in form. They are packed with meaning and significance. You often need to read between the lines a little bit to fully appreciate the story. Having said that, Audible experience was great. The different stories are read by different voices, so that was nice bit of variety. My two favorite stories were Black Vodka, which is the title of the book as well, but then I'm probably biased because Black Vodka centers around this character who goes on a date with a woman and they go on Polish vodka tasting. I'm Polish and I have a lot of appreciation for a good vodka. But the story is fantastic too. We've got this key character who's a man who's got a hump on his back. and he is trying to get this woman who is a girlfriend of his colleague to go out with him. He also works as a marketing agent, and this is why we have title Black Vodka, because this is what he is designing a campaign for. I'm not going to tell you any more about it. It's a short story, so if I tell you any more about it, I'll tell you everything. But my second favorite novel was titled, I'm just looking at my notes, Placing a Call. It was the most gorgeous little portrayal on grief and on loss. Very sad, but beautifully done. So, yes, if you're looking for a short story collection that you want to listen to, go on Audible, find it. Because some stories are as short as 2 minutes, some are 20 minutes, but some are as short as 2 minutes. You can listen to one while doing your washing up or doing your laundry, especially if you want to start something that you want to finish in the same go.
It is time, it's the perfect summer night. Those three words are spelled out in your eyes. But before I go on, say something wrong.
Okay, so the final book I read in December is Breakfast at Tiffany's. Now, this book, mixed feelings about this one. I couldn't originally get into it. I started it in December, but I actually didn't finish it until the beginning of January. The first half was really dragging for me. The second half was a little bit better. First of all, it's an entirely different story to the one that you know from the movie. The movie has a happy ending, the book doesn't, and is much, much sadder. We follow a woman who is trying to escape her very traumatic past and effectively reinvent herself into this version of herself that will protect her from any further emotional damage in her life and will make her indestructible. And for some reason, I didn't find that portrayal entirely convincing. Something just didn't click for me. I appreciate what the author was trying to do here, and there was definitely that effort to balance the characters' sort of need to be free and the need to also belong somewhere, to feel secure, and that constant struggle that she would have been experiencing. But perhaps it was because of that the character almost felt to me like too much of a two-dimensional character, too straightforward. You know, we human beings, we quite complex creatures. And I don't know, if I didn't know who wrote this, I would be guessing that this was written by a man. And that's maybe not fair, but no, this was not my favorite book. If you are looking to get into classics, I wouldn't start with this one. However, the writing in here is very good. And there were some sentences that just made me sort of stop and think, ooh, I really appreciate that. For example, I made a note that on page 47, when the main character, Fred, and by the way, the whole book is told from Fred's perspective. Fred is a person who lives in the same block of apartments as the key female character, Holly. He watches various people going in and out of Holly's apartment. Then he says, that gave me something to chew on. By Sunday, my jaws were quite tired. I thought that was quite clever and funny. I think I need to watch the movie again. I don't remember the movie that well. I must have watched it years and years ago. I almost think that if it wasn't for Audrey Hepburn making the key character stand out so much, we probably would not even hear of Breakfast at Tiffany's. But like I said, the movie was obviously quite rewritten, so it may not be fair to talk about the movie and the book in the same sentence. I don't know. Lots of people say that In True Blood by Truman Capote is very good. So at some point, I might reach for that to make sure I do justice by him. Okay, I think we're going to call it a day and go home, especially as Roxey has decided to jump into Cold Lake. And I better go home and give her a hot shower. And yes, we haven't installed hot water in the outdoor tap just so that our dog can have a hot bath after muddy walks. Does that make me dog crazy? Or just normal? I don't know. Let's see the damage. Oh my goodness. You are black. You are no longer Fox Red. You are black. Yes, big bath for you today. Good job. Wait. Okay, go ahead. Okay, we are both home now, washed, fed, and I am now having a delicious cup of tea. Is there anything better than a hot cup of tea after you have just done a long, cold winter's walk? Also, some of us may or may not be having a nap. Before I go, I wanted to give you a quick glimpse, since we in my office space anyway, of my bookshelf, which I will be reorganizing in my next video. Let me lift the camera. Okay, so going from the top, you can see that all the books are sort of shoved together. There is no order to them whatsoever. You can see this is a complete mess. And I'm a little bit embarrassed showing this to you like that, but the whole point is that it is supposed to be an unfiltered, real portrayal of my bookcase state at the moment. I also have some notebooks here. I have to sort them out. And then there is another cupboard at the bottom, which I need to sort out. I don't even remember what's in it. But also I have some cookbooks here, which they shouldn't even be here. They should be in the kitchen. So there's a lot to sort out. Also, while I'm reorganizing this space, I will talk about different publications for different classics. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, please watch my next video next Friday. See you then.